Lock It Up podcast. Tune in to stay safe.
Ever feel like cybersecurity is changing faster than you can keep up with it?
Yeah,
A lot to keep track of.
it is.
But that's what we're doing today.
Absolutely.
We're going on a deep dive
Love a good deep dive.
based on what you guys wanted to hear about.
Oh, nice.
We're digging into the latest cybersecurity trends,
Okay.
incidents based on your picks from the Lock It Up podcast and the IBM X-Force Threat Intelligence Index, which is a mouthful.
It is.
Get ready for some eye-opening insights and maybe even a few tips to help you bolster your own defenses.
For sure. You're absolutely right. The threat landscape, it's constantly evolving. And I think that's really interesting this year as we're seeing this big shift away from some more traditional attack methods. But it definitely doesn't mean that things are getting any easier.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, because I saw that the IBM report actually shows that phishing,
Right.
while still a threat,
Oh, yeah.
it's not actually the top attack method anymore.
Exactly. Attackers are getting sneakier, more sophisticated.
Really?
That same report highlighted this huge increase in the use of stolen credentials.
What?
So think about that. Instead of tricking you to give up your password, they're using passwords that have already been compromised,
Oh, wow.
which makes these attacks so much harder to detect, right?
Oh, for sure.
Because it looks like legitimate activity.
Oh, so it's like they have a key to the back door instead of trying to kick down the front one.
Exactly.
Makes sense in a scary way.
Yeah,
And the Lock It Up podcast really drove at that point home, I thought, with the Change Healthcare breach.
absolutely. That was a big one. I mean, that incident just really underscores how much damage can be done when legitimate credentials are compromised.
Yeah.
You know, they got into the system by using stolen logins,
Right.
caused all this disruption,
Yeah.
and walked away with a hefty ransom.
It's scary.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that we need to go beyond just strong passwords to protect ourselves.
Okay, so strong passwords alone aren't going to cut it anymore. So what's the takeaway here?
Yeah.
Are y'all just sitting ducks?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say sitting ducks, but this shift toward these more sophisticated attacks using stolen credentials means we have to be more vigilant than ever.
Okay.
Multi-factor authentication is essential. We'll get into some more practical tips a little later on.
Okay.
But first, I think we need to talk about how ransomware itself is changing,
Oh, no.
because it's not just about locking you out of your computer anymore.
Wait, it gets worse.
In a way, yeah.
I'm scared to ask.
The Lock It Up podcast, they pointed out this really alarming trend, info stealers.
Info stealers.
Yeah, they've seen a huge surge lately, and these guys, they're not interested in holding your data for ransom. They want to steal it and sell it.
Steal it.
Mhm.
So are we talking identity theft, corporate espionage, that kind of thing?
Exactly. These info stealers are after your logins, financial data, anything they can get their hands on.
Wow.
This whole shift toward data theft, it's got huge implications for individuals and businesses.
This is starting to feel like a really high stakes game.
It is.
And it's not just cyber criminals that we're dealing with here.
Right.
What about nation state actors?
Oh.
Are they still a major threat?
Absolutely. The Lock It Up podcast brought up the case of APT31,
Okay.
which is a Chinese state-sponsored group, and they were targeting U.S. officials.
Oh, wow.
And what's really interesting is they were using phishing, but not in the way you might think.
Okay. So they weren't trying to steal my Amazon login or something?
No, not this time.
Okay.
They were using phishing for reconnaissance.
What did that mean?
So they were planting trackers and emails to see who clicked, what information they could gather.
Oh, sneaky.
It's all part of a bigger strategy.
So it's less smash and grab and more they're casing the joint?
Precisely.
Okay.
They're getting the lay of the land for even bigger and more sophisticated attacks down the line.
Wow. So they're playing the long game?
Absolutely. And when you connect that to this rise in stolen credentials that we were just talking about, it paints a pretty concerning picture.
Yeah.
They're not just after immediate access. They're gathering the keys to the kingdom.
Oh, wow. This is serious stuff.
It is.
This isn't just about protecting our data. This is about protecting our infrastructure, our institutions,
Yeah.
everything.
They're getting it.
Yeah.
And speaking of protecting infrastructure, it brings us to this increasingly blurry line between cyber espionage
Oh, boy.
and outright cyber warfare.
Cyber warfare.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
It is. And
Yeah.
we're seeing it play out right now in the Ukraine conflict.
Okay, so we're talking real world consequences.
Yeah.
Hit me with the details. What's
Yeah.
going on in Ukraine?
Yeah.
All right, cyber warfare. It sounds kind of like something out of a movie,
Yeah,
but you're saying this is happening like right now
it is.
in Ukraine.
It's a harsh reality. And the Lock It Up podcast highlighted this. They had these Ukrainian intelligence reports about this wiping out of this staggering 2 petabytes of data from this Russian research center.
2 petabytes. I don't know what that means.
It's a lot of data.
Is that like all the data?
It's a lot. Like, imagine every document, every piece of research, all that information built up over decades,
Oh, wow.
gone.
That's devastating.
A massive blow, not just in terms of the lost data, but, disrupted operations, lost intelligence,
Right.
psychological impact.
Oh, for sure.
And that's not even the only example.
Really?
It also took down 60 terabytes of data from this consulting firm
Good Lord.
that was working with the Russian government.
So we're talking about like crippling attacks on critical infrastructure.
Absolutely.
What's the goal? Is it just about like causing chaos?
Well,
Or is there something more strategic at play?
so it's definitely about disruption, but there's also a huge strategic layer to this.
Okay.
These attacks are meant to cripple the enemy's ability to function, to gather intelligence,
Right.
to maintain control.
So it's like taking out their eyes and ears
Essentially, it's information warfare
on a massive scale.
on a massive scale.
Wow.
And that brings us to another point of vulnerability that's, it might not be as dramatic as outright cyber warfare,
Okay.
but it can be just as devastating.
Which is
Supply chain attacks.
supply chain attacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it, but I don't really know like what it means.
So think of it this way. If you contaminate a well at its source,
Yeah.
everyone who drinks from it gets sick.
Right.
That's what a supply chain attack does to software.
So you're targeting the source
Foundation.
to spread the damage far and wide.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. I see where this is going.
The podcast actually gave the example of this XZUtils case.
XZDo.
Yeah, so this software, it's used in tons of other programs. It's like a building block,
Okay.
And so attackers figured out a way to insert malicious code into that building block,
Oh, no.
which meant that anyone who was unknowingly using that infected software,
Right.
they were basically giving them a free pass into their system.
Well, that's so sneaky.
It is. And you know what?
Right.
It wasn't even this like super technical hack.
Really?
It was a combination of technical skill and social engineering.
Social engineering.
These attackers, they gained the trust of the developers over time, built relationships,
Oh.
and eventually got access to the source code,
So they hack the people, not the computers.
essentially, which just goes to show trust is essential,
Right.
but it can also be a huge vulnerability.
Especially in the open source world, right?
Exactly. And it just highlights how we need to be so vigilant, particularly when it comes to having access to that source code.
This is a lot to process.
It is.
Like we've covered, phishing is evolving, ransomware is going full on data theft, nation states are playing the long game, and now we have supply chain attacks that can like cripple entire systems.
Yeah.
It feels like the threats are getting more and more sophisticated by the day.
They are, but that doesn't mean that we're powerless.
Okay.
Awareness is half the battle.
Right.
And by understanding these evolving threats, we can actually start to build much stronger defenses.
I like the sound of that. So what can we do?
Well,
Is there any way to stay ahead of this kind of technology?
I think it's definitely a new frontier.
Yeah.
And staying informed is going to be like the biggest thing,
Okay.
because these threats will evolve, and as they evolve, so will the methods of combating them.
Okay.
But I think it's important to remember that even with all this new fancy technology, basic cyber hygiene is still our first line of defense.
So back to basics.
Back to basic.
What are the key takeaways here? Like, what can our listener do right now, today, to be more secure?
So strong, unique passwords,
Right.
more important than ever, and multi-factor authentication
Okay.
wherever you can.
Multi-factor authentication. Got it. Anything else?
Be cautious about suspicious emails,
What?
suspicious links.
Okay.
Remember, those accounts could be compromised.
Right.
Always double check with the sender directly if you have any doubts.
So vigilance is key.
Absolutely.
Trust your gut. And when in doubt,
Verify.
verify.
Exactly.
Okay, what about all this talk about AI and cyber warfare?
Right.
It feels like so much of this is out of our control.
Well, and I think there's this common misconception that cyber attacks only target like governments and these large corporations. But the reality is most cyber attacks are actually aimed at individuals and small businesses.
Really?
Yeah,
So we all have a responsibility to be proactive about our own cybersecurity.
absolutely.
It's not just about protecting our data, but it's about understanding that we're all part of this larger digital ecosystem.
Yeah, think about your own digital footprint.
Yeah.
Your passwords, your devices, your online activity, every step you take.
Right.
It contributes to a safer online experience for yourself and for everyone else.
It's a team effort.
It is.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you for taking us on this deep dive.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
It's been eye-opening, to say the least.
It's a lot, but knowledge is power, right?
Right.
The more we understand about all this, about how the landscape is evolving, the better equipped we are to navigate it safely.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. We'll keep bringing you these deep dives into the topics that matter most. Until next time, stay curious.
Stay safe.
And stay safe.